Ethan Carter tightened his grip on the strap of his duffel bag as he stepped out of the taxi. The city skyline shimmered with the last remnants of twilight, casting elongated shadows across the pavement. He had always found urban life both exhilarating and unnerving, a constant hum of activity that reminded him of how small he really was. Yet tonight, his mind wasn't on the city. It was on the apartment he was about to enter and the man who lived inside it, his stepbrother, Liam Hayes. Ethan hadn't seen Liam in over a year. Their parents' late marriage had complicated their relationship more than either of them had admitted, and for most of Ethan's life, the bond had been polite but distant. Liam was older, confident in a way Ethan envied, with a magnetic presence that drew people in effortlessly. That same confidence now seemed to fill the space of the apartment even before Ethan had crossed the threshold. The door swung open before he could knock, revealing Liam's easy grin and the faint scent of cedar and sandalwood that lingered around him. "Ethan," Liam said warmly, his hand brushing Ethan's shoulder in a gesture that felt more intimate than necessary. "Glad you could make it. Come in, come in. Let me take your bag." Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second, taken aback by the casual closeness. He reminded himself that it was just Liam's nature to be friendly, charming, almost flirtatious, but he couldn't ignore the strange flutter in his chest. He handed over the duffel bag, feeling a curious mix of anticipation and unease. The apartment was exactly as Ethan had imagined, sleek and modern, but with a warmth that made it feel lived in. Books lined the shelves haphazardly, with some stacked on the floor beside an overstuffed armchair. A low, ambient light from a floor lamp bathed the room in a soft glow. Liam's taste was obvious, minimalist, yet intentional. Every detail seemed designed to draw attention without demanding it. "I made some tea," Liam said, breaking Ethan out of his reverie. He moved past the sofa, handing over a steaming mug with a faintly mischievous smile. "I hope you're not expecting anything fancy. I know how you feel about herbal blends." Ethan chuckled, accepting the cup. "You remember more than I thought you would." His voice softened. "Thanks." They settled into the sofa, and for a while, conversation flowed easily. Liam asked about Ethan's work, his recent move, and even about the small bookshop he had opened months ago. Ethan responded honestly, though he noticed himself tensing whenever Liam leaned slightly closer than necessary, as though the space between them had been measured deliberately. After a while, the talk drifted to more personal matters, relationships, loneliness, and the way people hid parts of themselves even from those closest to them. Liam's gaze lingered on Ethan longer than usual, unafraid, yet thoughtful. Ethan caught himself looking away, feeling a strange pull he hadn't anticipated. "You've changed," Liam said finally, voice low. "Not just physically, you've got a kind of confidence now. It suits you." Ethan felt heat rise to his cheeks. Compliments from Liam had always carried a weight, a subtle tension that he hadn't experienced with anyone else. "I don't know if I'd call it confidence," he murmured. "Maybe cautious optimism." Liam laughed softly, the sound resonating in the cozy apartment. "Cautious optimism," he repeated, shaking his head. "You're always so careful, Ethan. I envy that about you and, at the same time, it frustrates me." The words struck Ethan more than he expected. There was an edge to them, a curiosity that felt dangerously close to something more personal. He sipped his tea, trying to steady the thrum of his heart. Dinner was simple, nothing elaborate, yet the atmosphere felt charged in a way that made Ethan acutely aware of every glance and casual touch. Liam reached over to adjust the napkin on Ethan's lap, his fingers brushing lightly against Ethan's wrist. The contact lingered a moment longer than necessary, and Ethan found himself staring at his hands, suddenly conscious of the heat spreading across his skin. "You're quiet tonight," Liam observed, leaning back and studying him. "Something on your mind?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Part of him wanted to laugh it off, to insist he was fine. But another, quieter part, the part that had always been aware of Liam's subtle charm, whispered that he wasn't fine. He nodded, taking another sip of his tea. "Just thinking," he said carefully. "About everything." Liam tilted his head, his expression thoughtful, almost predatory in its precision. Everything, huh? That can be dangerous. His tone was teasing, but there was a sharpness beneath it that made Ethan's stomach clench. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Liam suggested a movie, and Ethan agreed, though he noted the deliberate proximity as they sat side by side on the sofa. The room was dim, the flicker of the screen illuminating Liam's profile. Ethan felt a tension in the air, electric and unavoidable. He reminded himself that he was stepping into unfamiliar territory, that his feelings were his responsibility and his alone. As the opening credits rolled, Liam shifted slightly, letting a hand rest near Ethan's on the armrest. Ethan's pulse quickened, and for a brief, dizzying moment, he considered moving his hand closer, curious about how far this subtle connection could go. But he resisted, holding on to the thin line of propriety. Still, the encounter had unsettled him more than he expected. He felt drawn to Liam in a way that scared him, a feeling that was complicated by familial ties and the unspoken boundaries they had always observed. Ethan didn't want to admit it, not yet, but he was curious, dangerously curious. When the movie ended, Liam leaned back, eyes glinting in the dim light. "It's late," he said softly. "But you don't have to go to bed yet. We can talk a little more, if you want." Ethan felt a shiver of anticipation run through him. He wasn't sure if it was excitement, fear, or desire, but he knew that staying could change everything. That he nodded, words catching in his throat. "Sure," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'd like that." And in that quiet agreement, the room seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the two of them suspended in a moment that promised discovery, danger, and something neither had dared to name. The night stretched ahead, heavy with possibility, and Ethan realized that by stepping into Liam's world, he had unknowingly stepped into something far more complicated than he had anticipated. The living room felt smaller than it had an hour ago, though Ethan knew the dimensions hadn't changed. The soft glow of the lamp, the faint hum of the city outside, and the lingering scent of sandalwood created a kind of intimacy that made him hyper-aware of Liam's presence beside him. Every shift of Liam's body, every quiet sigh, seemed to resonate in a space that should have been ordinary, mundane. Yet it wasn't. Ethan had tried to focus on the movie, but his attention kept drifting. Liam's gaze occasionally flicked toward him, casual yet intense, as though trying to gauge a reaction. Ethan caught himself meeting those glances more often than he intended, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and hesitation. He reminded himself it was just familial affection, or at least that's what he wanted to believe. "Do you ever feel like people don't really see you?" Liam asked suddenly, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. He tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing as if daring Ethan to answer honestly. Ethan blinked, surprised by the sudden depth of the question. "Sometimes," he admitted cautiously. "I think most people only see what they want to see." Liam's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Exactly. That's why it's dangerous when someone finally notices you in a way that matters." His words hung in the air, uncomfortably charged, and Ethan's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure if Liam meant friendship, something deeper, or something neither of them was willing to name. The conversation shifted naturally, yet every topic seemed to carry an undercurrent of intimacy. Liam spoke about his work, his travels, the people he'd met, and the relationships that had shaped him. There was a candidness to his words, an honesty that Ethan had never seen before. And the more he listened, the more he realized how little he actually knew about Liam, not just as a stepbrother, but as a man. When Liam leaned back on the sofa, his hand brushed Ethan's lightly as he gestured to emphasize a point. It was a small touch, but it lingered, and Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He looked away quickly, his mind suddenly aware of the heat rising in his chest. There was a line here, a boundary that had never been crossed before, and yet Liam seemed oblivious, or perhaps purposefully indifferent, to its existence. As the evening wore on, Ethan wandered the apartment under the guise of getting another cup of tea. He noticed small details, a framed photograph of Liam with a friend he didn't recognize, a stack of letters tied neatly with a ribbon, and a journal lying open on a side table. Curiosity tugged at him. He hesitated, knowing some boundaries should not be crossed, but the temptation was difficult to resist. Ethan's fingers brushed the journal almost accidentally, and a page caught his eye. The handwriting was neat but urgent, thoughts spilling onto the paper with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. Liam's words were intimate, sometimes reflective, sometimes confessional, detailing moments of loneliness, desire, and longing. And then, a passage that made Ethan's breath catch, a mention of feelings for someone close, someone impossible to categorize. That he closed the journal quickly, heart racing. What he had read, if interpreted correctly, suggested Liam had long harbored emotions that went beyond friendship, beyond the stepbrotherly bond Ethan had always assumed existed. Ethan's mind spun, questioning what it meant, questioning his own reactions, questioning whether he should confront Liam or pretend he had never noticed. Returning to the living room, Ethan tried to regain composure, but the atmosphere had shifted. Liam's expression was unreadable, but Ethan could feel the tension between them like a taut string ready to snap. Words seemed heavier now, glances loaded with implications neither of them dared voice aloud. "You seem distracted," Liam observed softly, tilting his head to meet Ethan's gaze. His eyes were searching, almost vulnerable, but there was also something daring in the way he looked at him. "I'm fine," Ethan said quickly, though the lie sounded hollow even to his own ears. He shifted on the sofa, acutely aware of how close their knees were, how Liam's shoulder brushed his in subtle, electric ways. Liam leaned slightly closer, as though reading Ethan's inner thoughts without needing them spoken. "You don't have to pretend with me, you know," he murmured, voice low. "I can tell when someone's holding back." Ethan swallowed hard, aware that the night had become a delicate dance, one of unspoken desires, moral dilemmas, and dangerous curiosity. He wanted to ask questions, to clarify boundaries, but the words felt trapped in his throat. Instead, he allowed a moment of silence to pass, feeling the weight of Liam's gaze and the warmth of his presence. The city outside had quieted, leaving only the soft hum of distant traffic and the faint flicker of light from the television. Ethan felt the room shrink around them, as though the apartment itself was conspiring to draw them closer. He told himself repeatedly that he needed to maintain distance, that this was all temporary, that nothing should change. And yet, every instinct in his body screamed that the evening was already transforming into something unpredictable. Liam reached over, brushing a stray strand of hair from Ethan's forehead. The gesture was small, intimate, and entirely intentional. Ethan froze, caught between resisting and leaning into the closeness, heart hammering against his ribcage. He could feel Liam's eyes on him, assessing, curious, patient. "You've always been careful," Liam said softly. "But sometimes, caution keeps you from seeing what you really want." His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried a weight that Ethan could not ignore. Ethan's hands clenched in his lap. He didn't know how to respond, didn't know what this evening might lead to, didn't know if the moment had already passed the point of no return. And yet, beneath the anxiety, a thrill ran through him, a dangerous, exhilarating thrill that made him wonder if he was ready to explore feelings he had never allowed himself to acknowledge. The clock ticked quietly, the night stretching ahead like an uncharted path. Liam's hand lingered near Ethan's, unspoken and unhurried, while Ethan struggled with the undeniable magnetism between them. He realized that by staying here, by choosing to be present, he had already stepped into a world that would test his boundaries, his morality, and his understanding of desire. "I suppose I should get some rest soon," Ethan said finally, though neither truly wanted the evening to end. Liam tilted his head, a faint, knowing smile playing at his lips. "If you want, we can stay up a little longer. There's no rush. Sometimes, the most important conversations happen late at night." Ethan hesitated, heart pounding. Part of him wanted to retreat, to restore the safe distance that had always defined their relationship. But another part, the part he couldn't ignore, urged him to stay, to see where the night might lead, to confront the unspoken tension that had been simmering between them for years. He nodded slowly, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "All right, let's talk." And with that, the fragile line between curiosity and temptation had been crossed, leaving the evening suspended in a delicate tension, poised for discovery, revelation, and the unexpected turns that lay just ahead. The apartment felt different now, though nothing had changed. The soft glow of the lamp and the distant city hum remained, yet the air seemed heavier, charged with anticipation. Ethan could feel it in every fiber of his being, the unspoken tension that had built steadily throughout the evening, now impossible to ignore. Sitting beside Liam on the sofa, he realized that the quiet closeness between them had shifted from tentative curiosity to something far more tangible. Liam's gaze lingered on him, calm yet probing, as if weighing Ethan's thoughts and desires without needing a single word spoken. There was a patience in Liam's eyes, a deliberate restraint that made the moment stretch and stretch, each second carrying the weight of unspoken possibilities. Ethan's pulse raced. He tried to measure his own reactions, to ground himself in reason, but the intensity of the moment made logic feel distant, almost irrelevant. "You've been quiet," Liam said softly, his voice low and intimate. "You're thinking, aren't you?" Ethan hesitated, unsure what to admit. Every instinct warned him to retreat, to restore the boundaries that had always defined their relationship. But another part of him, the part that had long been fascinated, even drawn, to Liam, urged him to speak, to explore the feelings he had suppressed for so long. Yeah, I am," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Thinking about us, I guess." Liam's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Us," he repeated, letting the word hang between them. "That's dangerous." Ethan swallowed hard. The word itself carried a weight he had never anticipated. "I know," he admitted, "but I can't. I can't pretend I'm not curious." A brief, heavy silence followed, filled only by the soft hum of the city outside. Then Liam leaned just slightly closer, the proximity sending an unexpected thrill through Ethan. He felt the warmth of Liam's shoulder near his, the subtle brush of his arm against Ethan's, each touch deliberate yet restrained. Ethan's mind whirled. The room had shrunk around them, leaving only the two of them, suspended in a moment that felt fragile yet electric. "You don't have to hide anything from me," Liam said softly. "I've felt things I shouldn't have, for a long time. And maybe you've noticed, too." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had noticed. Every glance, every casual touch, had been a signal he hadn't fully understood, until now. And now, hearing Liam articulate it, the tension inside him shifted into something deeper, something that was impossible to ignore. "I have noticed," he admitted, his voice shaking slightly. "And I've wondered what it would be like, if..." He stopped, the words choking off, too vulnerable to speak aloud. Liam's hand moved gently, brushing a loose strand of hair from Ethan's forehead. The touch was electric in its simplicity. Ethan felt a shiver ripple through him, a mixture of desire and apprehension, and for a moment he considered withdrawing entirely, retreating to the safety of distance and propriety. But he didn't. Something deeper, more compelling, rooted him in place. "You don't have to say it," Liam murmured, leaning closer, his breath brushing Ethan's cheek. "I already understand." The world seemed to narrow to the small space between them, the warmth of Liam's body, the subtle scent of cedar, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Ethan's mind raced with a chaotic mix of guilt, longing, and curiosity. He had never imagined this, never allowed himself to imagine it, and yet here he was, suspended on the edge of something that could change everything. Then, almost imperceptibly, Liam closed the distance. Their lips met in a brief, hesitant kiss, soft, searching, and charged with the weight of years of suppressed emotions. Ethan froze initially, startled by the intensity, but the moment melted into something tender, something intoxicating. He felt a surge of exhilaration, mixed with fear, knowing that this small act carried consequences far beyond the room they were in. Pulling back slightly, Liam rested his forehead against Ethan's. "We can stop any time," he whispered. "But I didn't think I could, anymore." Ethan nodded, his chest tight with emotion. "I don't want to stop," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But I don't know where this goes." "You don't have to know," Liam said softly. "Not yet. We just experience this, and see where it leads." The next moment stretched like hours. They spoke in quiet murmurs, sharing thoughts and fears, laughter and confessions, each word dissolving the remaining barriers between them. There was no rush, no pressure, only a slow, careful exploration of feelings that had been buried under years of assumption and restraint. Ethan discovered parts of Liam he had never seen: vulnerability, tenderness, longing. And in turn, Liam discovered Ethan's curiosity, his desire, and the honesty he rarely allowed himself to express. Hours passed in a blur of quiet intimacy. The television screen was forgotten, the city lights outside became distant, irrelevant. What mattered was the fragile connection between them, the careful negotiation of desire and morality, and the unspoken understanding that whatever happened tonight would linger far beyond these walls. Eventually, the first hints of dawn began to creep through the windows, painting the room in pale gold and soft lavender. Ethan leaned back, breathing deeply, feeling both exhilarated and exhausted. He looked at Liam, whose expression was unreadable, but whose eyes held a quiet intensity that mirrored his own. "I should probably head to bed," Ethan said finally, his voice soft. Yet there was a strange reluctance in the words, a hesitancy that betrayed how much he wanted to linger in the moment. Liam nodded, a small, enigmatic smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah," he said gently. "But, this isn't over. Not in my mind." Ethan felt a flutter in his chest, a mixture of hope and apprehension. He didn't know what the future held, not how their relationship would evolve, not how their families might react, not what boundaries they might eventually cross. All he knew was that tonight had changed something irrevocably. He gathered his thoughts, took a deep breath, and allowed himself a final glance at Liam. There was warmth there, promise, and danger, an intricate blend that made Ethan's pulse race. The moment had ended, but the story was far from over. As he rose to head toward the guest room, Liam's voice followed him, soft but deliberate. "Sleep well, Ethan. Tomorrow, we figure out what this means." And with that, the night closed around him, not with resolution, but with the promise of discovery, tension, and the thrilling uncertainty of what awaited in the days to come.